There is a moment, and if you are watching this, you probably know exactly what I am talking about, where you walk into a room and stop. You stand there, completely still, and for a few seconds that feel much longer than they are, you cannot remember why you came. You look around for a clue. Nothing. You walk back out, and the second your foot crosses the threshold, it comes back to you. The glasses. You came for your glasses. You laugh it off. Everyone does. You tell yourself it is just tiredness, just stress, just one of those things. But then it happens again and again. And slowly, quietly, the jokes stop feeling funny. I know this feeling not because someone told me about it, but because I lived inside it. I watched it happen to someone I loved, and then I started noticing it in myself. The name of an actor on the tip of my tongue for 20 minutes. The word for something I use every single day, suddenly gone. A story I had told 100 times, interrupted by a blank. Where the ending used to be. Small things, but the small things are never really small when they start happening every day. What frightened me most was not the forgetting, it was the story I had been told about what the forgetting meant. That this was aging, that the mind, like the body, simply wore down, that there was a version of myself ahead that I could not stop from coming slower, quieter, more confused, that the best I could do was accept it gracefully and hope it moved slowly. I believed that story for longer than I should have. Most of us do, because it sounds reasonable, and because no one ever really sits us down and explains what is actually happening inside the brain when memory starts to slip. Not aging, not wear and tear. Something far more specific and far more reversible than any of us have been led to believe. Here is what the research actually shows. Inside the brain, there is a process that neuroscientists have begun calling the regenerative protein cycle. This is the mechanism by which the brain repairs itself overnight, strengthens neural connections, and consolidates new memories. It is not one single protein but a cascade, a sequence of biological events that, when functioning properly, keeps the mind sharp, retrieval fast, and new learning possible well into old age. For most of our lives, this cycle runs without us thinking about it. It is as automatic as breathing. But after 60, something changes. The production of the compounds that trigger this cycle begins to fall. Not dramatically at first, gradually, almost imperceptibly, and as it falls, the cycle slows. Neural pathways that used to fire instantly begin to hesitate. The brain's overnight repair work becomes incomplete. Memories that should be consolidated float instead. Fragile, half-formed. Names that should be instant become searches. Words that should be automatic become blanks. This is not your fault. It is not a character flaw or a sign of what is coming. It is a biological shift, one that happens to nearly every person on the planet past a certain age, and it has nothing to do with intelligence, willpower, or how much you read or do crossword puzzles. It is chemistry, and chemistry, unlike time, can be changed. I did not believe that at first. I needed evidence. So I started reading not wellness blogs or supplement marketing, but actual peer-reviewed research. Journals, clinical trials, studies conducted at universities with control groups and measurable outcomes, and what I found there stopped me completely. There is a plant. Its name in Sanskrit is Brahmi, what the Western world calls Bacopa Monnieri. It grows in the wetlands of India, and for over 3,000 years, it was a staple of Ayurvedic medicine, given specifically to scholars, monks, and students who needed to retain vast amounts of information over decades of study. Ancient practitioners did not know why it worked. They knew only that it did, that people who used it consistently remembered more, learned faster, and stayed mentally sharp far longer than those who did not. Modern neuroscience finally has an explanation. Bacopa contains compounds called Bacopa compounds have a direct effect on the proteins that govern synaptic communication in the brain. In multiple clinical studies, including a landmark randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine, adults over 60 who supplemented with Bacopa Monnieri for 12 weeks showed statistically significant improvements in memory recall, processing speed, and attention compared to the placebo group. Not marginal improvements, measurable, reproducible, significant ones. The monks were right. The science just took 3,000 years to catch up. I put everything together in one place for you. It's in the first link in the description. Think of it as your personal guide to everything we covered today. It's the most complete resource I've found on this, but Bacopa is only part of the story. Because the regenerative protein cycle is not a single switch, it is a system. And like any system, it needs multiple things to function at its best. This is where the research becomes genuinely remarkable. Rhodiola rosea is a root that grows in the cold mountain regions of Europe and Asia. Viking warriors used it. Siberian hunters carried it on long expeditions. Today, researchers study it specifically for its effect on mental fatigue, the kind that makes thinking feel slow and effortful by midday, the kind that makes you read the same paragraph 3 times and still not hold it. Rhodiola works by regulating cortisol, the stress hormone that, when chronically elevated, actively damages the hippocampus, the region of the brain most responsible for forming and retrieving memories. Lower the cortisol load on the brain, and the cognitive fog that so many people over 60 experience begins to lift in ways that feel almost immediate. Then there is L-Tyrosine, an amino acid the body uses as the direct raw material for producing dopamine and norepinephrine. These are not optional neurotransmitters. They are the chemicals that make retrieval fast, that make focus feel natural, that make the difference between a mind that grasps and a mind that grasps and holds. Without adequate L-Tyrosine, the brain runs on fumes. With it, production of these essential compounds can be restored to levels closer to what the brain maintained at 40. And finally, the one piece that makes all the others work: green coffee bean extract. Not for energy, not for weight, but for cerebral circulation. One of the least discussed contributors to cognitive decline is reduced blood flow to the brain, a natural consequence of vascular changes that begin in middle age. When circulation drops, even powerful compounds cannot reach the neurons that need them. Green coffee bean extract has been shown in multiple studies to improve endothelial function and increase cerebral blood flow, essentially opening the delivery pathway so that everything else can actually do its job. Together, these 4 compounds do something that no single ingredient can do alone. They address the regenerative protein cycle from 4 different angles simultaneously, restoring the raw materials, reducing the interference, protecting the infrastructure, and ensuring delivery. The result, in study after study and in the experience of thousands of people who have tried this combination, is not a subtle shift. It is a recalibration. I have heard from people who described it as the lights coming back on. A woman in her early 70s who had stopped hosting family dinners because she could no longer hold a multi-step recipe in her head while carrying on a conversation, who cooked Thanksgiving dinner for 11 people and felt, for the first time in years, completely present for all of it. A retired professor who had quietly stopped reading academic papers because he could not retain what he had read long enough to reach the end, who finished a 400-page biography in 9 days and could recall specific passages a week later. A grandfather who had begun carrying a notebook everywhere to compensate for a memory he no longer trusted, who put the notebook down one morning and realized, midway through the day, that he had not needed it. These are not miracles. They are what happens when the brain is finally given the conditions it needs to do what it has always been capable of doing. The capacity for repair does not disappear after 60. It does not disappear after 70. What disappears gradually, silently, for entirely reversible reasons, is the biological support system that makes repair possible. Restore that system, and the brain responds. The question is not whether your brain can still change. It can. The question is whether you are going to give it what it needs or keep waiting for things to get better on their own. Before you go, the first link in the description. That's where I put the full guide. Everything we talked about today, all in one place. No searching, no confusion. Just open it when you're ready. I want to leave you with this. The moment that changed everything for me, the moment I stopped accepting the story I had been told about aging and the brain, was the moment I realized that the people who seemed sharpest in their 70s and 80s were not just lucky. They were not simply born with better genes. They had, consciously or not, done something different. They had taken the biology seriously. They had treated the brain not as something to watch decline, but as something to actively maintain. It is not too late for that. It was not too late for any of the people I told you about tonight. And it is not too late for you. The brain you have right now, the one that walked into that room and forgot why, the one that searched for that word and came up empty, that brain still has extraordinary capacity. It is waiting for support that most people never think to give it. Tonight, before you go to sleep, is a good time to start. If this helped you, if something here felt true, or gave you something to think about, please subscribe. There is more coming. Every week I go deeper into what the research actually says about keeping the mind strong, the body capable, and the years ahead worth showing up for. I would love to have you here for it.